until you make the unconscious conscious. It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. We often know exactly what we need to do to improve our lives. We know which habits are damaging us, which responsibilities we are avoiding, and which decisions we have postponed for too long. We may sincerely desire change and even construct a clear plan for achieving it. Yet when the moment to act arrives, something changes. The task suddenly feels heavier. Our attention moves elsewhere. An inconvenience becomes a reason to delay. We decide that tomorrow will be more suitable, that we need further preparation, or that we should wait until we feel properly motivated. The intention remains, but its force weakens. This is one of the most frustrating experiences in psychological life, recognizing what must change while remaining unable to act consistently upon that recognition. We are not merely prevented by external circumstances. We experience ourselves as divided. One part of us moves towards change, while another repeatedly interrupts that movement. The frustration becomes more intense because the failure appears to be our own. We make promises to ourselves and then break them. We create plans and abandon them. We tell ourselves that this attempt will be different, only to find the same pattern returning. Eventually, the problem begins to affect our sense of identity. We internalize these repeated failures and begin to perceive ourselves as lazy, undisciplined, or incapable of change. This suggests that desire is not the only force involved. Another part of the personality may have become organized around protection, familiarity, or avoidance, and likely experiences the proposed change as a threat to the existing psychological order. This resistance does not announce itself directly. It can appear through hesitation, distraction, perfectionism, or self-sabotage. This is the realm of the unconscious. Understanding the unconscious allows us to understand how motives, fears, and emotional associations can influence behavior without being fully available to conscious reflection. It helps explain why we can sincerely intend one thing while repeatedly doing another. The question is therefore no longer simply, why am I not disciplined enough? It becomes, what is my resistance attempting to protect me from? Modern self-help often begins from a reasonable assumption. If a person understands what needs to change, they can move towards it through clearer goals, stronger motivation, and greater discipline. There is some truth in this. Practical advice can be useful. A schedule can create structure. A routine can reduce friction. And motivation can provide the initial energy required to begin. The difficulty is that these methods usually address the conscious side of the conflict. They strengthen the part of the personality that wants change. A person hears an inspiring idea, imagines a different future, and feels temporarily aligned with it. But this temporary shift can create the impression that the deeper problem has already been resolved. In reality, the motivational experience has intensified conscious desire without altering the unconscious conditions that repeatedly oppose it. The person has become clearer about what they want, but not necessarily about why another part of them resists it. And when this emotional intensity fades, the old patterns return. The routine becomes difficult. The enthusiasm weakens. Avoidance reappears. The cycle of dissatisfaction, inspiration, temporary effort, and relapse continues. Each return of the old behavior produces renewed frustration, which sends us in search of another method capable of recreating the feeling of transformation. The problem is not that all self-help advice is useless. Much of it can improve behavior when the obstacle is practical, but it becomes limited when it treats every failure to change as a problem of motivation or discipline. Willpower encounters the same limitation. Willpower assumes that one unified self has made a decision and must now control an unwanted impulse. But the psyche is not always unified in this way. A person can consciously want a different future while remaining psychologically attached to the past. The unwanted behaviour may therefore be doing more than obstructing a goal. It may be preserving a form of psychological safety. From the perspective of conscious intention, these behaviours appear self-defeating, but within the wider organisation of the personality, they may still serve a function. Willpower can suppress the behaviour temporarily, but suppression is not the same as resolution. A person can force themselves to act for a period, but when the same pattern repeatedly returns despite knowledge, planning, and sincere effort, greater force does not reach the source of the problem, and the conflict remains intact. One part of the personality demands change. Another interprets that change as dangerous. The more aggressively the conscious mind attempts to dominate the resistant part, the more divided the person may become. This is why failed willpower often produces shame. The individual does not simply conclude that the method failed. They conclude that they failed. They become harsher with themselves and treat resistance as evidence of weakness. Yet self-condemnation only intensifies the emotional conditions that the unwanted behavior was already helping them regulate. More force produces more internal pressure, while the underlying function of the pattern remains unexamined. The central limitation of motivation and willpower is therefore not that they never work. It is that they operate primarily by strengthening conscious intention. They tell the ego what to pursue and how to exert greater control, but they do not necessarily explain why the personality is divided against itself. A practical method tells us how to begin the task, but it does not reveal why completing it feels psychologically threatening. Lasting change requires more than strengthening the part that wants the future. It requires understanding the part that remains organized around the past. The question is not simply, how can I force myself to act? It is, what unconscious function does my resistance serve? The central problem is not that our conscious intentions are false. The problem is that conscious intention does not contain the whole explanation for human behavior. The reasons available to reflection represent only one part of the psychological process. Beneath them lie memories, fears, emotional associations, defensive habits and unresolved conflicts that remain outside awareness, but continuing to influence how we think, feel, and act. This is why the same person can appear to move in two opposing directions. Consciously, they say, I want to change. But their unconscious behavior says, this pattern protects me from something. That protection may no longer be necessary. It may even be damaging. But the pattern often developed for a reason, and the psyche may continue to preserve it long after the circumstances that produced it have changed. Procrastination, for example, may appear to be a simple refusal to work, but it also postpones evaluation. As long as the work remains unfinished, it cannot be fully judged. The person remains protected from discovering whether their ability is equal to their ambition. Perfectionism may appear to reflect high standards, yet it also makes completion impossible. If nothing is ever finished, nothing has to be exposed to criticism, disappointment, or comparison. People-pleasing may be praised as kindness or generosity, while also functioning as protection against rejection. The person does not merely want to help. They may have learned that belonging depends upon remaining agreeable, useful, and undemanding. Withdrawal may look like indifference, but it can protect against vulnerability. By creating distance before another person has the opportunity to reject them, the individual preserves some sense of control. Compulsive behaviours may provide temporary relief from emotional stress. The object of the compulsion may vary, but its psychological function to interrupt anxiety, loneliness, shame, or emptiness remains the same. From the standpoint of conscious intention, these behaviours appear irrational. They interfere with goals, damage relationships, and reinforce the very conditions the person wants to escape. But from the standpoint of the pattern itself, they possess a coherent psychological logic. The behavior is not necessarily organized around what is best for the person in the present. It may be organized around what once felt necessary for emotional survival. A child who learns that disagreement threatens affection may become an adult who cannot establish boundaries without intense guilt. A person who was humiliated when they became visible may later avoid opportunities that would place their abilities under public judgment. Someone whose sense of worth depended upon achievement may become paralyzed by tasks that carry the possibility of failure. In each case, the present behavior is shaped by meanings formed under earlier conditions. The person is not simply responding to the situation as it now exists. They are also responding to what the situation has come to represent. This is the point at which examining the unconscious becomes necessary. The unconscious becomes visible through the contradictions of ordinary life, the intention repeatedly abandoned, the reaction that exceeds the situation, the explanation that never quite accounts for the behavior, and the patterns that survives every conscious resolution. The unconscious is therefore not simply what we have forgotten. It includes what has been excluded from the identity we consciously maintain, what has never been adequately understood, and what continues to influence us, without being recognized as our own. This distinction matters because the ego naturally interprets behavior through the story it tells about itself. The ego says, "I delayed because I was tired. I remained silent because it was not the right moment. I abandoned the project because it was no longer important." These explanations may contain some truth. But when the same structure repeats across changing circumstances, the conscious explanation becomes increasingly incomplete. The unconscious is inferred from this repetition. We do not observe it directly in the same way that we observe a deliberate thought. We encounter its effects. We recognize it through recurring emotional patterns. Disproportionate reactions, compulsions, projections, and failures of intention. Jung's concept of the complex helps clarify how this occurs. A complex is an emotionally charged organization of memories, expectations, and beliefs formed around a particular theme. A person may carry complexes related to rejection, authority, inadequacy, or abandonment. When a complex is activated, the present situation becomes connected to a wider network of emotional meaning. A manager's criticism may not be experienced merely as professional feedback. It may activate an older conviction of worthlessness. A partner's temporary distance may not be experienced merely as a need for space. It may be interpreted through a structure organized around abandonment. An opportunity for advancement may not represent only success. It may also activate fears of exposure, responsibility, or separation from others. The person reacts to the immediate event, but also to everything the event has unconsciously come to represent. This is why resistance cannot always be overcome by presenting the conscious mind with better arguments. The person may already know that the criticism is limited, that the relationship is secure, or that the opportunity is desirable. But the complex does not operate primarily through deliberate reasoning. It organizes perception and emotion before conscious reflection has fully begun. The unconscious also contains aspects of the personality that the ego has refused to recognize. Jung called this the shadow. For example, a person may identify as entirely kind and therefore exclude anger from conscious life. Yet excluded qualities do not disappear. They may return through resentment, envy, projection, or resistance. In this sense, the unconscious contains not only the source of resistance, but also the psychological resources needed to move beyond it. The task is to understand the deeper conflict of which the pattern is an expression. This requires a change in the questions we ask. Instead of asking only, "How do I stop procrastinating?" we might ask, "What becomes possible or threatening if I complete the work?" Instead of asking, "Why can I not say no?" we might ask, "What do I believe will happen to the relationship if I disappoint this person?" Instead of asking only, "Why do I keep returning to this compulsion?" we might ask, "What emotional state appears immediately before the urge?" These questions do not excuse the behaviour or remove personal responsibility. They make responsibility more precise. Lasting change becomes more likely when we understand the psychological conditions under which the behaviour occurs. Without that understanding, the individual may continue attacking the symptom while preserving the structure that produces it. This is why the unconscious must be approached not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a source of information about the divided personality. The aim is not to assume that every hesitation contains a profound hidden meaning. Fatigue is sometimes simply fatigue. A poor plan may simply be a poor plan. External obstacles remain real. The unconscious becomes especially relevant when a pattern persists despite knowledge, changing circumstances, and sincere effort. At that point, the contradiction can no longer be explained by insufficient information or motivation alone. Something within the personality is preserving the pattern. The essential question, therefore, is not merely whether we want to change. It is whether the wider psychological organization of the personality can tolerate what change would require. Can we tolerate judgment without retreating into perfectionism? Can we tolerate disapproval without returning to people-pleasing? Can we tolerate uncertainty without postponing every decision? Can we tolerate vulnerability without withdrawing? These are not questions of desire alone. They concern the emotional conditions under which desire must become action. The unconscious names the hidden psychological activity revealed by the gap between what we intend and what we repeatedly do. It explains how one part of us can move towards change while another remains organized around protection. Until that second position becomes conscious, the conflict is likely to be experienced only as failure. Once it becomes visible, however, the meaning of the struggle begins to change. The problem is no longer simply that we lack discipline. It is that some part of the personality has not yet been persuaded that change is safe.